Hello, this is Derek Christopher Abikinari. I'm a student at California State University, Pomona, and my faculty mentor is Dr. Alex Madva. Let me express my deepest gratitude for the privilege of addressing this consequential question before us. The idea is that culture is constituted by collective representations. Well, why do we create culture and form relationships beyond matters of mere survival? Well, culture is predominantly a social phenomena, and one aim of this talk is provide a far-reaching, significant theory with explanatory force as to why culture is constituted by collective representations. And in order to do that, we need to conceptualize about the fundamental constituent properties of culture. Well, culture is a very important phenomenon in our discourse, but it's important to understand what it is and what does it entail. What derails it? What negates it? What is it comprised of? Well, here I define culture as the way that non-material objects like thoughts, language, values, and actions all come together with material objects to form a way of life. Well, as humans of a particular biological given organisms, as humans, we have certain tendencies. We tend to behave in certain ways. We like certain things, we have desires, we have intention, goals, and beliefs. Notice all these things that would constitute our identity is precisely a cultural phenomena. And what this statement entails is that culture is the way our ideas about the world interact with material objects. Think of it this way. Think about crossing the street or ordering a cup of coffee. If you're like me, when you are about to cross your street, when you see a red light, you resist the impulse to cross the red light. And if it's green, you cross the light. But notice that is a cultural adaptation. It's a cultural phenomenon. The fact that you think of green as a possibility of passing the light is a cultural reality, because language is one of the properties of culture, right? And in order to conceptualize about this, the linguist famously says, John Searle says, that what counts as an object, what counts as reality, is a function of the system of representations that we bring on to bear to reality, namely language and linguistic categories. Well, language mirrors reality, right? We use language to capture truth and capture the dimension of the world. So this is a linguistic analysis of culture. We are predominantly social animals, and we use process of stimulus and response to construct a reality through procedures of induction, generalization, and association. Well, it's important to notice that as humans, we're predominantly social entities, and we want to associate with other people. We want to form communities, create a viable global civilization, and all these intentions and beliefs and representations that we have are fundamental properties of culture, because in order to provide a far-reaching significant theory with explanatory force about the nature of culture, we have to conceptualize about how it is constituted. And the aim of my talk is to posit to you the notion that culture is constituted by collective representations. What that means is that language, thoughts, our intentions, beliefs, hopes interact with the natural world for our conception of reality. Heidegger famously said, "Man acts as though he were the shaper and master of language." Well, the fact is, language remains the master of man. For Durkheim, who's a famous sociologist, culture is constituted by collective representations. These are not ideas in the Weberian sense. Max Weber was also a sociologist. Collective representations are the vehicles of a fundamental process in which publicly shared symbols constitute social groups, while they constrain and give life to individual consciousness. Symbols do not reflect group life, they constitute it. Well, Weber focused on meaningful action, and for him the fundamental unit of analysis was always the individual actor, the individual human being, such as us. We have a certain property that we tend to interact with the world, and we derive meaning from our experience, right? If I were to go to a classroom and the professor disseminates a certain term, I bring back my memory, my episodic memory, and I recognize that term and I derive meaning from my experience. Well, this is a cultural phenomenon. Obviously, language plays an important role on the fundamental constituent element of of culture, right? This position that I've just disseminated, many contemporary sociologists might criticize this position by posing the claim that we are independent social actors, unbounded by claims of community, tradition, and history. After all, they might say, the essence of individualistic societies is that we are rational, independent social actors, and we can't be defined by mere collective social values and historical contingencies. I personally think this is a flawed assumption. Even the essence of liberalism, the fact that we think of liberalism as a positive value, or we think of classical liberalism as a correct notion of justice, even that is a cultural reality, right? Anything that we see as a positive end in society, a particular conception of the good, is a cultural society. Because one of the flaws in the liberal idea of public reason is that it's too restrictive. It conceives of us as too narrowly, as not sufficiently bound up in claims of community, tradition, and history. But we shouldn't think of ourselves, for all moral and political intents and purposes, as free and independent selves, unclaimed by prior moral ties to community, tradition, and history. After all, we're a part of this vast fabric of causality, and we are only situationally appropriate. So one of the implications of the talk that I just given you is that understanding the properties of culture can actually lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves in an increasingly connected society. One of the great merits of sociology, of someone like Weber and Durkheim, is that their theories have enormous intuitive appeal. If you understand their theories, you're better able to conceptualize about justice, what makes a state legitimate, what is virtue, what is a social phenomenon, and culture is at the center of that. It's as the epicenter of that. Understanding culture, its properties, and what is constituent has enormous implications for our discourse. If you think about the individual actors, such as myself or everyone else, as predominantly social animals, then our intuition might change. We're better able to conceptualize about reality, right? Reality is about a certain paradigm shift. In the year 19th century, there was the classical empiricist tradition, but now in contemporary times, we think of humans as social entities, right? And that paradigm, the fact that the ideas of the self, the conception of the self, have shifted, that's a relevantly recent phenomenon. And to me, culture is at the forefront of that. Understanding culture and its constituent properties has enormous implications for our discourse. And this is a talk given to you by Derek Christopher Abikinari. Thank you very much.